now that the Morrison ministry has been sworn in. It's down to business, and a lot of people are asking what next for energy policy. The Minister Angus Taylor has revealed the big stick laws would be a priority when Parliament returns. It's expected to be the first week of July. We're going to get some more on this now. Matthew Rennie joins me live from our Brisbane studio. He's an Ernst Young partner who specialises in power and utilities. Matthew, thanks so much for your time today. Is this going to be a good move? It's obviously not very popular with the energy companies.
Well, I think, I've got a lot of sympathy for governments focusing on lowering prices and increasing reliability, but I think we kind of we need to move beyond the archetypes a bit in the discussion. We need to move beyond good renewables and bad coal and painting big retailers as the bad guys, and start to have more serious conversations about where the energy industry needs to go in the next 20 years and what policy settings we need to do in order to bring the investment and the change that we need in operations to make it happen.
Yeah, it does often descend into a debate about renewables versus coal when we do talk about energy policy. So what can be done and how can we bring prices down?
Well, we think that in 2021 there'll be a crossover point between what we call virtual power plants, so the battery and solar systems that can move electricity around the grid. We think that in 2025 there'll be a crossover between electric vehicles and combustion engines. And we know that between 2030 and 2050, there's going to be a situation where renewables are cheaper than existing coal-fired power stations. So over the next 15 to 20 years, there's going to be an increased digitisation of the electricity industry, which will benefit consumers in the long run as they start to make choices which are more sophisticated around what they want to use in their day-to-day lives.
I mean, it all sounds very nice to have cheaper renewables into the future 15 years down the track, but what about now? A lot of people are struggling to pay their power bills. Is building a new coal-fired power station the answer?
Well, I think there's no doubt that people all across the spectrum are struggling with electricity bills, and I think we've seen large increases in the last 15 to 20 years. What we've also seen, though, is a reduction in renewable energy down from around $10 a watt installed in 2005 down last month to 23 cents a watt in China. And so I think we are seeing this rapid cost decrease due to technology. And I've got some faith in technology to be able to deliver us the sort of changes that we need.
Yeah, but how long will it take? As I say, lots of people are struggling to pay their bills at the moment. They can't afford to install solar panels so they can generate their own power. What hope is there for them? Well,
so if we look at the way in which electricity is produced, the cheapest way presently of generating electricity is an existing coal-fired power station. Increasingly, that's becoming a new renewable facility being the cheapest. And as electricity starts to be used in peak times when the sun goes down, it's either pumped hydro or gas. And each of those costs a different amount to produce. And so it's only really technological change in relation to how all of that electricity is produced that's going to ultimately bring prices down for consumers. Big stick methods of forcing people to bring down prices below cost is not really where we want to see the incentives being provided for business in any country, I think, and we just need to be sort of mindful before we intervene in the market.
So how can we ensure that the big energy retailers aren't ripping off consumers? How can we make sure they bring down that wholesale price?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, the market itself is quite competitive on the retail side. For the last 20 years or so, retailers, particularly the large ones, have competed amongst themselves. I think in the next really 2 to 5 years, we're going to see new entrants come into that market. BMW, for example, in Europe is now selling electric vehicles at the same time as it's selling in-home energy management systems and electricity supply contracts. We've seen companies like Shell enter Australia and with intentions, we think, to retail. And I think the technology companies are also looking around very hard. So I think some of those new entrants will increase competition and we can start to see some of those benefits come through to consumers.
A lot of people are, tossing up the idea of getting their own solar panels or battery storage systems at home, but they can be pretty costly, especially the batteries at the moment. We know that this technology advances really quickly, and as it does so, it generally comes down in price. So I guess what's the advice to people who are looking at getting it? Should they wait, and how long should they wait for the prices to come down?
Well, I think we've got enormous penetration of solar in Australia at the moment. Something like 1 in 4 homes have solar in Queensland, and it's similar in other parts of the country. Battery systems at the moment, and solar and battery systems in particular, are beginning to be offered as a product. Over time, I think they'll be provided more as a service than a product. You can certainly buy them up front, and there's a large cash cost in that. And we know that some of the previous policies of the Labor Party pre-election were around this. Over time, we think that what will probably happen is when we hit this cost parity point beyond 2021, we'll see more retailers offering them as a service, where you'll simply use the electricity from them as you would any other appliance.
So along with the big stick legislation, which we've heard from the Energy Minister is going to be rediscussed when Parliament resumes, what would you suggest to the government to include in their energy policies? Should they be re-looking at the National Energy Guarantee?
Well, I think the key choice for policy really is what we want to put in place to make the electricity system in 2030 and 2040 actually occur. So we think that that'll be between 40 and 50% renewables. We think there'll be a huge amount of transmission investment that's required in order to connect those up. Distribution will be associated with electric vehicles and virtual power plants and shifting load. And we'll see very large retailers enter the market and can compete amongst themselves with new entrants. So the sorts of policies really that we should be aiming for are ones that let the market operate and let technology bring the solution and the market bring the solution where we can. It's only really in areas where we think there's going to be failure that we should intervene. So around the edges, perhaps some incentives around electric vehicles, perhaps some incentives around in-home battery management systems for customers, and a whole lot of money, I would have thought, to be brought into organisations like AEMO, the market operator, which has got some really difficult problems to solve in the next 15 to 20 years.